Rutgers football is at Nebraska on Saturday for a pivotal Big Ten matchup, 4 p.m. Eastern time. And to have us help break down this matchup, Justin Adams, Nebraska Voice, the voice of college football, and the host of the Big Ten show on YouTube. Justin, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. We just did a little preview on mine, so I'm excited to be on this side and breaking down Nebraska's end of it.
Yes, Rutgers fans will have to check that out as well. We'll trade social medias and get both of them out there. But obviously, big matchup for both programs. Nebraska off to a 4-1 start in year 2 of head coach Matt Rhule's tenure. Rutgers fans know him well from his time at Temple. What are your thoughts? And I guess first off, what were your expectations coming into this season? And how has year 2 gone so far for Matt Rhule's program?
Yeah, and first thing I forgot to mention the watch party. So the Big Ten show, if y'all do want to go over there and subscribe to that, or go to the Voice of College Football, I posted a Rutgers preview over there as well. But if you go over to the Big Ten show, we're going to be doing a live watch party. Myself and my co-host Sonny Verma from Locked On Illini, the Rutgers Nebraska game. So if y'all do want to check that out, join us in the comments or even hop in the stream. We're going to be dropping the link, so y'all check that out. But I'm sorry about that. I'll go ahead and dive into your question here. So year 2 under Matt Rhule, what I was kind of looking at from the Frost era into Rhule, and I said what I thought would be a success story in year 1, because people ask about win totals. I was like, let's take the list of things that are wrong under Frost, because it's a lot. And in year 1 under Matt Rhule, if that list is shorter, then it was a success. Now in year 2, I expected Nebraska, we had this kind of easier early slate of games. And I had Rutgers pinned as our first loss. Now, Illinois, of course, has been better than I even expected, and a lot of people expected. But they're very similar to Rutgers too. But so that is one loss that I think I can take on the chin, but I feel like a lot of Nebraska fans had kind of it was the 1-score loss, the emotion of, finally making the top 25 again and losing, against another ranked team at home. It was like that 800-pound gorilla on our back was still there. However, if you look at that game, Nebraska did make mistakes, but it didn't look like the same old Nebraska. Nebraska was getting hit in the mouth and they were punching back. They got out executed and out schemed and out coached in that game. So overall this season, I think, it's been a resounding success because coming in with Dylan Raiola, there was a lot of questions about how good he was going to be, how good he was going to look, if we could even have a passing game. And we do have an excellent passing game. Isaiah Nair, Jamal Banks coming out of the portal have been excellent. But overall, outside of kind of what we were talking about earlier, where your fan base points out all of the negatives, I don't think you can look at anything Matt Rhule has done and point out a negative. Of course, little things, special teams and stuff like that. But overall, as terms of the culture and things outside of football, this was a culture of losing. And there are still remnants of that culture there. But the fact that he has been able to come in and take what Frost had and this mentality that Frost had, where they didn't even have the players doing squats in the weight room. It was very much this soft mentality, and there wasn't much of a culture of like, we want to win or pride in winning. It was just kind of like a bunch of individual performances on the field, but no unity. I feel like Nebraska finally has unity within not only the locker room, but they trust the staff. Nebraska returned 77% of its total production from last season, which was 3rd in college football. They trust Matt Rhule. They trust the staff, and the players trust each other. And I think that's one of the biggest things. There's a cohesion and camaraderie that wasn't there before. And I think a lot of that has to do with Matt Rhule's mentality that he's brought in here.
Yeah, those are some great points. I personally like Matt Rhule. I think, he showed his at Baylor. He knows how to run a big-time program, and I thought that was a great hire for Nebraska. And I think him and Schiano have some similarities there, too, in terms of how they run their programs and building that identity and culture. So Nebraska seems like they're off to a really good start in his tenure. Obviously, a big-time recruit and 5-star quarterback, Dylan Raiola, huge addition for Rhule, and is off to a tremendous start, completing about 70% of his passes to over 1,200 passing yards, 9 touchdowns. What has been the key to his success so far, and how critical is his development throughout this season for Nebraska to accomplish their goals for this year?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest keys to his success is, of course, the guys on the outside, Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nair, because those are both guys who have a lot of college football experience. Jamal Banks was over at Wake Forest, and he was their top receiver, and he had 0 drops, but he's in a Wake Forest offense that had a terrible quarterback. That wasn't a offense that puts up numbers. But Jamal Banks is kind of a DeAndre Hopkins type of player. He's a sure-handed guy. Like I told you before, he's a big guy. So with him, it's not really 50-50 balls. It's 80-20 balls. So he knows how to use his body, knows how to use his physicality. So those, and Isaiah Nair coming over from Wyoming, and then transferred to Texas, got injured there and transferred over to Nebraska after he kind of couldn't get back in the rotation there in a talented Texas rotation. But those guys have been such a key cog to the success of this team because, their Isaiah Nair especially has been a key target that he can go to in rhythm throws, in deep throws, the whole 9, but they're good at getting open for him. Nebraska struggled a lot with separation last year and getting guys open. I think this team has been, schemed up very well in terms of being able to get guys open. I think Satterfield has done a good job with his play calling in terms of just how he set things up in terms of Dylan Raiola to be successful. But I think a lot of what Dylan Raiola does too is a lot of his own doing. He executes at a high level. He may, take some risks and make some off throws, but with a quarterback, you're fine with that. You're fine with him taking some risks sometimes and maybe being a little off, but he doesn't put the ball in harm's way a ton. It's not like egregious errors. He's not turning the ball over willy-nilly. He's able to take a snap, unlike Jeff Sims last year, but now he's able to read the defense. He's able to get to his spots. When a defensive line forces him off his spot, he's good at creating. He's good at moving the pocket. And of course, we've seen he's good at the arm angles and different stuff like that. The whole Patrick Mahomes nonsense is so tired. But, it's a lot of those things. And Jeff Christensen was his QB coach and is also Patrick Mahomes' QB coach. And I think that leads to a lot of his confidence, trusting that Jeff Christensen does a really good job of setting these guys up successfully to be able to operate in any situation. And I think that's what he does well. But also just the confidence that he has in himself, it doesn't allow him to get rattled. He's very rarely rattled. And if he makes a mistake, he rebounds quickly. If he comes out and there's a mental lapse, he can recover from it. And that's something Nebraska hasn't had the ability to do is when we get punched in the mouth, can they recover from it? And he's done that. He's been a quarterback that can do that. So he's just kind of confident beyond his years and looks like an experienced guy out there.
Yeah, supremely talented. Certainly a concern for Rutgers fans this week. And you mentioned Isaiah Nair and Jamal Banks, 2 big receivers. The Rutgers secondary is certainly going to be tested with them. And kind of a 2-headed monster just in terms of their production. But Nebraska, 5 receivers, over 10 catches this year. They seem like they've really done a good job of mixing it up and having different weapons in the pass game. How much do you expect Nebraska to attack Rutgers through the air from the start of the game? And in terms of just how important it's been to be able to have some versatility in the passing attack?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Nebraska will come out probably passing the ball, of course. Like I'd said before, Nebraska's offense really doesn't have a ton of identity. I can't really kind of figure out what our identity is. Rutgers, your identity, right? You have a very systematic offense. And with Nebraska, I don't know if this is a team that wants to control the clock or a team that wants to score quickly against Northern Iowa, a team that we beat pretty handedly. We actually lost the time possession battle pretty significantly in that game. So, and against Illinois, one of the big key drives, Illinois went down and they scored a 5-minute drive, converted like 4 third downs on that drive, and Nebraska went down in 3 plays and scored. And now I'm not saying that's a bad thing. We did get a touchdown off of it. However, your defense goes right back on the field, so I think there's some things game plan wise that Nebraska needs to do to find an identity. But I do think the early, key to this game for Nebraska is getting out to an early lead. And I think they really need to come out and try to put some strain on, that defense and kind of spread them out a little bit, get them out of the box and kind of get that run game going as well. I think the biggest key is try to get guys in space and try to make guys miss tackles and just trying to do what you can and maybe kind of blow the top off of the defense. With Satterfield, he believes in the huddling. He loves to huddle. He will be the last person to stop huddling, I promise, because he loves to get big. He loves to get physical, 2 tight end sets, but he likes to, use the deep ball to set up the run and vice versa. So I expect them to come out and try to get Raiola in a rhythm to try to just get, him seeing some passes go through and just trying to get this game plan started and try to set up the run game. The run game, in my opinion, the way they've had these running backs, I was on the free Emmett Johnson train. My tweet went viral on the free Emmett Johnson train because he was our running back for the majority part of last year because of the injuries. Now Dante Dowdle comes in and has got the majority of the touches, and Emmett Johnson, every time he touched the ball, he's been explosive, but against the big teams, he hasn't touched the field. Came out last week, finally touched the field, and what does he do? He broke a run. Like, he's a guy who I think Rutgers fans need to look out for in this game because, again, he hasn't been utilized a ton this season, but when he has, he's done the most of it, and he can make guys miss in space. He can make guys miss in a phone booth. He's got quick feet, and so he's a guy that I think Nebraska is really going to have to utilize to try to stress, Rutgers defense, because Dowdle is a guy that doesn't avoid contact. He's going to welcome it. He's going to try to run through you. But with Rutgers, we need a guy who's going to get out there and try to make people miss, get yards after the catch, et cetera, et cetera. So, I expect kind of that kind of game plan, and maybe they'll slow it down in the second half, and hopefully, if they have a lead, try to control the game a little bit more.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this is a matchup for the Rutgers defense that is not one traditionally with, even last year when they play pass first teams with speed and size, it's a little bit more difficult for them. Nebraska passing about 2/3 of the time. You mentioned Johnson's averaging over 8 yards a carry on 21 carries. Dowdell 60 carries, 4.6 yards per carry. But I think Rutgers being able to minimize their production is going to be key when Nebraska does choose to run. In terms of the offense as a whole, the offensive line's been pretty solid. You haven't allowed a ton of pressure. Rutgers has struggled generating pressure with that 4-man rush. They've had to be a little bit creative in terms of sending blitzes when they are able to be successful there. What are your thoughts just in terms of the approach that Nebraska will have, just in terms of, I know penalties have been a little bit of an issue this season, but I think 8 a game, over 70 yards. How much has that stemmed from the offense, and how much has that negated, I guess, in terms of sustaining drives and momentum when they've had, the ability to kind of move the ball?
Yeah, and we have had, so many penalties, and I know a lot of fans say this, but egregiously bad penalty calls. There was a pick play last week that got a touchdown taken off the board against Purdue in the first half, where Ryan Walters alerted because this formation, they tend to run pick plays out of the formation, so he said, "Look out for the pick," and Fedoni ran kind of his little route in, and then they had the other route going out, but Fedoni ran it perfectly, executed exactly how you coach it, moved his shoulder out of the way. They made no contact, 0 contact, but the defender fell. The defender was expecting contact, tripped over himself, and it was wide open, goes for a touchdown. They call it back on the replay. There's literally no contact, right? Against Colorado, Ramir Johnson breaks the 70-some-odd yard run in the second half. It gets called back to a phantom hold. So, I know a lot of us complain. I think the Big Ten officials have been bad across the board. I think the officials have been bad across the board in college football this year. I don't think they're targeting us. But what I say that to say, sometimes I feel like it's hard for us to look at these penalties this year and see how much of this is execution stuff and how much of this is just bad calls. I do think that in previous years, Nebraska's timing of penalties have been much, much worse. I think that has improved, but that's not to take anything away. The discipline does need to improve on this team. The offensive line, is a little bit beat up in terms of, we had one player go out early in the season and our depth was already an issue. And then Micah Mazuka is having some kind of issue with the staff. He's our best offensive lineman, so he's going to be a backup coming into this game. So that lends to, more holding stuff, more pre-snap infractions. And coming into the season, that was something they said in the they kind of did the close scrimmage, and they said one of the things that was an issue was penalties, stopping drives, and keeping 3 points from being 7. And so that is something that they're going to have to pay attention to, because it's going to be compounded in this game against a Rutgers team that doesn't beat themselves. And so they're going to really have to, and also, especially kind of in the red zone, they need to be extra careful, because you got to take what you can get against Rutgers in the red zone as well. So they can't be backing themselves up when they get in the red zone, when they get on the goal line. They've got to stay ahead of the chains in this game to be successful. So that's a very good point you bring up. But yeah, the execution there and the boneheaded penalties can't show up in this game.
So let's talk about the defense. Nebraska has been dominant against the run, but also just disruptive. The defensive front's been really strong. 16 sacks, 33 tackles for loss, 16 pass deflections in the secondary, forced 5 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles. This defense has been really, really good this year. It's a strength for this team. Overall, I guess, what's been the turning point for this defense? What's the strength of it, and how do you think they'll attack Rutgers?
Yeah, one of the things, about this defense, the cornerbacks were a question mark coming into the season of depth, not talent. And Tommy Hill, who's our number 1 cornerback, it looks like he'll be back in this game. He was out last game. But Bly Hill, who was supposed to be our cornerback too, has been gone the whole season. So we've had guys that have stepped in and played pretty well in that regard. So the secondary is sometimes a little bit of a concern, but again, they've stepped up, but the depth got to be there. If anybody gets injured, it's trying times right now on the outside. But you mentioned the defensive line, and the defensive line, it starts in the middle in this 3-3-5. What they do is basically a 3-3-5 is there to replace one of the down linemen with another defensive back, with a 5th defensive back. And that's kind of to keep up with the spread offenses of the modern college football, but it gives you a little less, beef up front in terms of just bodies, and you tend to have a little bit smaller defensive linemen in a 3-3-5, because it tends to lead towards quicker, type of people. So with Nash Hutmacher, it starts with Nash Hutmacher in the middle. His job is basically to disrupt things as much as possible. It doesn't always have to show up in the stat sheet. He tries to give numbers to Nebraska and give them the advantage. So he's trying to draw double teams. So you have him at the 0 nose, and you have 2-5 techniques on the outside. Those are going to be your defensive tackles, and that's going to be your Ty Robinson. And then off the other side, you're going to have your James Williams, Jamari Butler, those type of guys. And so what Tony White does is he schemes up very well. There's a jack position, which is kind of like, it plays a little bit of a hybrid between on the end and linebacker. But where the strength of his scheme comes in is the linebacker position, and kind of showing different fronts and bringing different stunts. Each look you get, the quarterback's going to get is going to be different. He's not going to show the same look twice, and he's going to bring different things off of it if he ever does. And so it's a really hard thing to prepare for pre-snap. So, with John Bullock at our linebacker position, he has been incredible this season. He was the highest graded defensive player last week at 92.1. I believe he had a pick 6. John Bullock, number 5, look out for him, because he's going to be a key cog in this game. And one of the things that Illinois did a good job of is really kind of stressing our defense in terms of taking their eyes and moving them off of where they need to be. It's caused guys to be a little bit out of position, and that's where they had success. So I think what Illinois will have, or what Rutgers will have to do, is very similar to that, and try to test the eyes of our linebacking core and really try to get them out of position as much as possible, and try to get some quick hitting RPOs. The run action pass, they all like to do the RPOs. I think those are going to be key. And the key there is just, like I said, move our linebackers out of position by kind of bringing different looks, or bringing the same look and running different things off of it. Illinois did that very well. You couldn't tell out of a formation whether they were going to run or what they were going to pass. And that is the hallmark of Kirk Shiroka, who you have on the other side. So, but John Bullock has been, a key part of the success of this defense, number 5 on there. And Nash and Ty, of course, disrupting things there on the line. And James Williams, number 90, has been very, very good in pass rush this season. One of the unsung heroes of this defense.
Yeah, I think they're stout defense for sure, and it's going to be a challenge. I have to ask, though, and I mean this respectfully, it's pretty crazy that Ethan Kaliakmanis is 2-0 against
Yeah.
Nebraska. Two very different performances 2 years ago. As a freshman at Nebraska, just 6 of 12, 137 yards, managed the game fairly well. Minnesota won that 20-13. And then last year, the season opener, and I did actually watch that game. I remember that, but he threw 44 times, just under 200 yards, not really efficient, about 55%. I guess, is there anything that you've taken away from facing him twice? And is there anything that he caused problems for Nebraska? And is there anything you think that they're going to specifically target him for based on that past history and obviously what you've seen from him so far this year at Rutgers?
Yeah, and talking about his time at Minnesota, well, that second loss I halfway blame on the fact that we had Jeff Sims at quarterback, and that guy he was horrible, as we all know. I think he had 1 touchdown to 6 interceptions total.
Yeah.
Crazy. But what I've seen from Ethan Kaliakmanis this year that I think is going to be key is Luke Altmaier is not a world beater. But what did he do? He came in and he executed the game plan. And I think more so than Minnesota, Ethan Kaliakmanis is in a better situation. I think they just have better game planning on that side. But I also think, he's very good at just what they ask him to do. And so he's not going to, force a lot of balls. He's not going to make a lot of mistakes. I just think his efficiency, what Illinois did against Nebraska is they out-executed. They were more efficient, and they out-game plan Nebraska. What is Rutgers' hallmark? They game plan, right? They scheme up, and they're going to try to out-execute you. And I think Ethan Kaliakmanis is the perfect quarterback for that. You'll have those 2 running backs kind of coming out of the backfield, and I think that sets him up perfectly in that RPO and that run action pass game. And like I talked about in my preview, Kirk Shiroka likes to do advantage versus disadvantage. He's going to attack where there's less numbers, and I think that's what sets Ethan Kaliakmanis up very well. He's good at making the right reads, the right decisions, and I think he's just kind of matured a lot in this season with this Rutgers team. But I think a lot of that has to do just kind of Rutgers setting him up for success with kind of the style they run.
Yeah, great points. And I said this to you on your show, but I think for Rutgers to win this game, I think Kaliakmanis is going to have a big game. Yeah. And I'm going to talk about it on my preview as well. I think, him being a game manager for a lot of these matchups is going to help them win. I think there's going to be a few games this year where he's going to have a big one. I think Nebraska is one of them. So it's interesting the history he has against Nebraska going into this one. Wanted to ask you, special teams. It's been a bit of an issue for Nebraska this year in terms of having 3 block kicks. Your field goal units have been really shaky. What have been the biggest issues? And I guess, how do you expect that turn in terms of strategy? Should Rutgers even expect, Nebraska to kick any field goals? Do you think they're going to, when they are on the Rutgers side of the field, are they just going for it the whole time?
I will tell you this. When I was trying to make predictions this week, I was trying to make it only touchdown predictions, even though I said 27-24 on my show. I don't know how we're going to get to 27. It requires field goals to be made. So put it nicely how bad our field goal unit has been. Tristan Alvano wasn't great last year, was about 50% of his kicks last year. He has all the talent in the world. He went 5 for 5 in the state championship game in Nebraska and kicked a 50-plus yarder at the buzzer to win the game, right? But kicking is so mental, and it seems like Alvano, he kicked the 55-yarder last year. It seems like Alvano is struggling in terms of, being able to get his confidence back and not overthinking. But another part of this too, Ed Foley, who's our special teams coach, last week there was a lot of the snap came out basically sideways, horizontal, and then the laces were a little bit in. So it's not just the kicker. John Hole is our backup kicker, and he's been trying to do something, hasn't been able to do much. 1 for 4 last week. Of course, I think a couple of those got blocked, but there's a big issue in execution of the special teams. It's not just from the kicker. The snaps bad, the holds have been bad. So that is something I do not expect to improve. And so I'm hoping we go for it on any 4th down. I don't care how long the 4th down it is. We're on that side of the field. We can't afford to give away points. So hopefully they either figure that out quickly or we're going for it on 4th down. So I think that's something that Rutgers can almost try to game plan for, because that's one of my concerns, is that teams might try to game plan to force Nebraska to take 3, just not let them beat them over the top because can't get 3 points. So the punting game, Bushini has been excellent. He's been incredible. Our return game last year, it was like we were just hoping, in previous years too, it's just hoping to not fumble the return or fumble the ball. So we've had a little bit more of a return game this year. So that part of it's been better, but that doesn't overshadow just how bad special teams overall have been, the kicking game, and that we got good coverage and stuff like that. In terms of kick return and kickoff, punting the ball, but just, yeah, the special teams, the field goal unit has been so bad. It frustrates me because I see guys make 70 yards field goals in the NFL on Sundays, and I see Temple's kicker make a 62-yarder earlier this season, and we can't get a guy to kick a 30-yarder. It's brutal, man.
Well, we talked about it on your show, the struggles that Rutgers has had as well with Jay Patel. And I think, his presence on the field, if he gets called upon to kick field goals, that'll be a big factor as well, if he can get over that mental hurdle of his struggles so far this year. So let's set the stage. Obviously, it's homecoming for Nebraska. This is a pivotal game for you. If you can win, go 5-1, 2-1 in Big Ten play, coming off that win at Purdue, which is a little bit of a slow start for your team. But obviously won pretty handily as that game went on. Huge crowd expected. This is, like I said, critical for Nebraska fans. You had it as the loss before the year. Now you're picking a close victory. Nebraska has struggled in close games over the past few years, even since Rhule's been back. Obviously still, getting his touches on all of the program. But I guess, what are your keys for Nebraska to win this game? And how do you think, if Rutgers does win, they ultimately do it?
I will say I have to kind of pick Nebraska in this one, but it's one of those things that, like, Rutgers, I know is going to be a tough team, right? So with Nebraska, the key is get out to an early lead. They're going to have to get out to an early lead and try to force Rutgers out of their game plan and try to make Callie McManus have to make some throws, or try to have to fit it into a tight window, or, make his life harder so you can force him into mistakes. He's not going to make mistakes unless you force him out of their game plan. Trying to force them out of running the ball as much as possible, which is not going to happen. But because that's just Rutgers' DNA, is going to be running the ball. But I think limiting that by trying to get as much of a lead as you can early in this game is going to be the key. And I think on the other side, if Rutgers can come out there and establish their line of scrimmage, establish the clock, and start controlling the clock. And what Illinois did is they didn't deviate from their game plan. I think if Rutgers comes in there and is able to stick to their game plan, they can win this game, because then that's going to be a close one-score game. And we know Nebraska tightens up in those one-score games. So I think if, Rutgers comes out what a game from Rutgers and what a win from Rutgers is going to look like, it might be Nebraska putting up over a ton of yards, but Nebraska will probably have penalties. Nebraska will definitely probably struggle in the red zone. Third down is going to be an issue. So that's another key too. Nebraska's really got to get off the field on third downs and convert third downs, because y'all's defense, I think I mentioned, was 7 for 24 total over the last 2 weeks in terms of keeping their opponent off the field on third down. Nebraska's going to have to get off the field on third down, because if they're not, that means Rutgers is sustaining drives, and they're going to have to execute on third downs, because Rutgers defense is going to try to keep the things in front of them, and I think they're going to force Nebraska into a lot of third downs. So got to be able to come out and execute on those things. So I think that's how it goes for both teams. And I think I mentioned before, I think if, Rutgers going to win just in pure Rutgers style, they're going to win by a score. I think Nebraska, if anybody wins by double digits, I think it will be Nebraska, but I still think this is going to be a close, hard-fought game. So I was actually surprised that the spread was as much as it was when it opened.
Yeah, great points. I agree with a lot of what you said. It's funny, as important as the opening of games is for any team in any game, I really think, both of these teams are going to be jockeying for position.
Yes.
In terms of whoever can get that lead first is going to have the advantage. whoever flinches first, obviously, if they can get out of the first quarter and it's 0-0, I feel like it's going to be even more of a coaching just chess battle throughout that game. And whichever team has to deviate off their game plan first, like you mentioned, definitely key. I think for Rutgers, they're going to have to turn over Raiola at some point. They're going to have to be able to capitalize on it. I don't think this is a defense that, they need to be more disruptive, and they need to be able to create some advantages there. Because with Nebraska's run defense, I don't expect Rutgers to be able to have, 3, 4, 75, 80-yard drives. They're going to have to get some big plays. And whenever they can get that from their defense, really gives them an advantage. We saw that at Virginia Tech in the one road game so far. Justin Adams, really appreciate all your great insight. People can find you at the Big Ten Show on YouTube. Why don't you give social media as well and promote that live show also?
Yeah, for sure. So, like you said, Big Ten Show on YouTube. You can go over there and follow us on there. I just dropped my power rankings. And yeah, we're going to have the live watch party this Saturday. So again, we'll drop the StreamYard link in the chat. Y'all just can watch along with us. Join us there. And you can also find me on X at _H-Town Husker. It's a mixed bag, but I try to keep it football over there, but I occasionally post boxing stuff as well, and stuff like that. So you can follow me over there as well. But yeah, I think that's everything. Yeah. Nebraska football, the voice of college football. That one too. I almost forgot that one. You can follow me there if you want to watch my Rutgers preview I did on their offensive system earlier. And Rutgers fans have been coming through clutch. They've been great in the comments. So I appreciate y'all.
Yeah, it was a great breakdown of what Rutgers does offensively. And I told you offline, I thought it's been really fun to see, opponent podcasts really be able to highlight things that Rutgers fans maybe take for granted or don't think about when we all fan bases focus on our own faults and mistakes and issues. You did a great job of really breaking down how Kurt Straka really simplifies this thing, the offensive system, and how he's been able to get so much out of this offense this year. So thank you so much for your insight, and definitely check out, all of his stuff as well as our preview that we did on your channel as well. So should be a great game, and sure we'll be talking at some point, but thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me again, man. It's a good time.
Absolutely. And thank you for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'll be back on Friday with a full game preview with David Anderson.